The evening air was cool, a gentle gift after a long day under the weight of fluorescent lights and heavier arguments. I had loosened my tie, a simple silk one my wife Sarah had bought me for our anniversary, and tucked it into the pocket of my trench coat. Walking was my meditation. The 10 blocks from the courthouse to my front door a time to shed the title, the robes, the gavel, and just be Arthur Hayes. A man walking home. My thoughts were on Sarah's lasagna. She'd texted me a picture of it in the oven earlier, a bubbling landscape of cheese and sauce that promised warmth and comfort. I smiled to myself. After 35 years of marriage, she still knew the surest way to my heart was through my stomach. The neighborhood was quiet. Old oak trees, their branches heavy with a century of seasons, formed a canopy over the street. The houses, set back from the road with manicured lawns, were dark save for the warm yellow glow in a window here and there. This was my world, the one I had built, one brick of hard work and one beam of determination at a time. It was a world of order, of peace, a world I thought I knew. I'd grown up in a different world, one where the streets were louder and the opportunities quieter. My father, a man with hands as rough as gravel but a heart as steady as a clock, used to tell me, "Arthur, in this world, to be seen as equal, you have to be twice as good. No, 3 times as good. You can't just walk the line. You have to be so far past it they can't even pretend you're close." I had lived by that. Graduated top of my class, made law review, clerked for a legend, built a career. I had become the Chief Justice. I presided over the highest court in the state, a place where the law was supposed to be a blindfolded woman holding a balanced scale. I believed in that woman. I had dedicated my life to her. That's when I heard it. The slow crunch of tires on asphalt behind me. It was a sound that didn't belong in the quiet rhythm of the evening. I didn't turn around. Not at first. My heart, which had been beating a steady, calm rhythm, gave a little stutter. It was a primal response, a feeling older than any law book. It was the feeling my father had tried to warn me about, the one I thought my title and my tailored suits had insulated me from. The car, a police cruiser, pulled alongside me, its engine a low growl. It paced me for a few yards, a shark circling in the dark. I kept my eyes forward, my hands in my pockets, my pace even. Just a routine patrol, I told myself. They're just keeping the neighborhood safe. But the knot in my stomach tightened. The window slid down with an electric hum. Evening, a voice called out. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It was an accusation in a single word. I stopped and turned. 2 officers were in the car. The one in the passenger seat, the one who had spoken, was young, with a hard set to his jaw and eyes that seemed to be permanently narrowed. The driver was older, heavier, with a tired, indifferent look on his face. "Good evening, officers," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. I had addressed courtrooms with less care. The younger one, his name tag read Miller, leaned out the window. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question hung in the air, thick and ugly. Not, "Are you lost, or do you need help?" but "What are you doing here?" As if my presence itself was a crime. "I'm walking home," I replied simply. "Home?" Miller scoffed, a little puff of air. He looked past me at the large brick houses. "You live around here?" "Yes, I do. A few blocks up, on Crestwood Lane." "I see," he said, drawing the words out. He didn't see. He didn't believe me. He looked at my plain clothes, a simple collared shirt, dark trousers, the worn trench coat. He wasn't seeing a man. He was seeing a stereotype, a black man in a wealthy neighborhood at night. In his mind, the equation had only one answer: criminal. "Can I see some ID?" he demanded. I sighed internally. I knew this script. I had seen it play out in countless cases that came before my court. The pretextual stop, the fishing expedition. But I was Arthur Hayes, a man who believed in process. So I reached slowly into my coat. "Hold on," Miller barked, his hand moving toward his hip. "Slowly, keep your hands where I can see them." My own hand froze. The spike of adrenaline was sharp hot. This is how it happens, I thought. A misunderstanding, a sudden movement, a tragedy explained away in a sterile report. I, who had spent a lifetime de-escalating conflict with words, was now in a situation where a single gesture could be my end. I took a slow breath. My wallet is in the inside pocket of my coat, I said, my voice as steady as I could make. I'm going to reach for it now. Slowly, he gave a curt nod. I pulled out my worn leather wallet. It was full of pictures of Sarah and my kids, my grandkids. It felt so thin, so useless against the weight of their suspicion. I didn't open it to the ID card with my photo and address. I opened it to the other side first, out of habit. There behind a plastic window was my official court identification, Arthur Hayes, Chief Justice. But I hesitated. A part of me, the proud part, the part that had worked 3 times as hard, screamed to flash that card in his face, to watch the arrogance drain from his eyes. But another part, a deeper, more weary part, just wanted to get home. It felt demeaning to have to use my title as a shield against a common indignity, to prove I was worthy of walking on my own street. So I didn't. I pulled out my driver's license instead and handed it to him. Miller snatched it from my hand. He shined his flashlight on it, then on my face, then back at the license. The older officer, Russo, just watched, his expression unchanged. Arthur Hayes, Miller read aloud, mispronouncing my last name. He looked at the address, Crestwood Lane. He handed it back to Russo. Run it. As Russo spoke into the radio, Miller got out of the car. He was bigger than I thought, and he moved with a kind of swagger that was meant to intimidate. He stood too close. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. We've had some break-ins around here recently, he said, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. Man fitting your description. My description? I asked, and for the first time, a bit of an edge crept into my voice. What description is that, officer? He smirked. You know, just a guy, hanging around. It was so lazy, so insultingly vague. He wasn't even trying to create a plausible lie. He didn't feel he had to. The radio crackled. A voice came through, tinny and distant. License for Arthur Hayes is clean. No wants, no warrants. Address is 112 Crestwood Lane. I should have been released then. The check was done. My identity and address were confirmed. My record was clean. There was no reason to detain me further. But Miller wasn't done. For him, this wasn't about the law. It was about power. He had stopped me, and he couldn't just walk away having been wrong. He had to find something. He had to win. What's in the pockets? He asked, nodding at my coat. My keys, my phone, my tie, I said. Your tie? He laughed. A short, ugly sound, right? Let's see. Empty them out. On the hood of the car. This was it. The line. I had been compliant. I had been respectful. But this was a step too far. This was pure harassment. Officer, I said, my voice low and firm now. You've seen my ID. You've run my name. I have done nothing wrong. I am going home. I took a step to walk away. It was a mistake. Miller grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. You're not going anywhere until I say you. Our instinct took over. I pulled my arm back. Take your hand off me. That was all the excuse he needed. In a flash, he had me spun around. My face pressed against the cold, hard metal of the cruiser's hood. The world tilted. One moment, I was the Chief Justice thinking about lasagna. The next, I was a suspect, helpless and humiliated on a public street. The shock of it was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs, resisting arrest. He yelled, as if to an audience that wasn't there. My cheek was scraped against the metal. I could feel the grit. I could smell the exhaust fumes. Russo was out of the car now, and together they wrenched my arms behind my back. A searing pain shot through my shoulder, an old injury from college football flaring up in protest. I winced, gritting my teeth. I am not resisting, I managed to say, my voice muffled by the car. This is unlawful. Tell it to the judge, buddy, Miller grunted. And then I heard the sound that will stay with me forever. The cold, metallic click-click-click of handcuffs being ratcheted tight around my wrists. The cuffs were too tight. They bit into my skin. The humiliation was a hot flush that spread through my entire body. They patted me down, their hands moving over my body with a rough, impersonal intimacy. They pulled out my keys, my phone, the silk tie Sarah had given me. Miller held it up, a tie. He said to Russo, shaking his head in mock disbelief. Look at that. He wasn't lying. They shoved me into the back of the cruiser. The seat was hard plastic, molded for discomfort. A cage separated me from them. I looked out the window at my quiet street, at the peaceful houses. It was like looking at another planet. I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if I had been ripped out of my own life. All the years of hard work, of being 3 times as good, of building a reputation, of earning respect, all of it vanished in an instant. In that back seat, I wasn't the Chief Justice. I was just what they saw me as, another black man in the back of a police car. The presumption of innocence, the very bedrock of the system I served, was a joke. Here, the presumption was of guilt, and my skin was the only evidence they needed. The ride to the station was silent. I didn't speak. What was there to say? I just sat there, the steel biting into my wrists, and felt a deep, hollow sadness settle in my chest. It was a sadness for myself, yes, but it was bigger than that. It was for all the young men who looked like me, who didn't have a title to fall back on. Men who endured this, and worse, and had no recourse. Their stories passed through my courtroom, sanitized into police reports and legal briefs. I had read the words, but I had never truly understood the feeling. The sheer, gut-wrenching helplessness. At the station, they led me through a back door. The place smelled of stale coffee, disinfectant, and a faint, underlying odor of human misery. They took my photo. The flash was blinding. They took my fingerprints, rolling each of my fingers in black ink. I looked at my hands, the hands that had signed legislation, that had held my children, that had rested on the Bible as I took my oath of office. Now they were stained, cataloged, processed like a piece of evidence. They put me in a holding cell. The door clanged shut with a deafening finality. The cell was concrete and steel. A single metal bench was bolted to the wall. I sat down, the cold seeping through my trousers, and for the first time, alone in the silence, the rage came. It was a cold, quiet rage, not the hot, explosive kind, but a deep, burning fire in my soul. Rage at Miller and his casual cruelty. Rage at Russo for his silent complicity. Rage at a system that I had championed, that I had believed in, that had just failed me so completely. The blindfolded woman with the scales tonight. She had peeked under the blindfold and decided she didn't like the color of my skin. I thought about calling Sarah, but I couldn't. I couldn't bear for her to hear the fear in my voice, to picture me here. I thought about calling the governor, the attorney general, but that felt like cheating. That was using the power, not exposing the problem. So I used my one phone call to dial the number of my chief clerk, David, a brilliant, earnest young man, fresh out of law school. He answered on the second ring, his voice full of sleep. David, it's Arthur Hayes. I said that. There was a pause. Judge, is everything all right? It's almost midnight. Not exactly, I said, and the absurdity of the situation almost made me laugh. I'm at the downtown precinct station. I've been arrested. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear his mind trying to process the words, to make them fit into his reality. Arrested, he finally stammered. For what? Is this a joke? Sir, I assure you, David, it is not a joke. They're charging me with resisting arrest and failure to comply. I need you to come down here. And David, don't call anyone else yet. Just come. I hung up, and I waited. About 20 minutes later, I heard a commotion outside my cell. Voices were raised. I heard David's voice, tight with a mixture of disbelief and anger. He's in there. The Chief Justice is in a holding cell. Then another voice, a deeper one. Maybe a desk sergeant. The what? The lock on my cell door was turned with a frantic energy. The door swung open. A portly sergeant with a flushed, panicked face stood there. Behind him, I could see David, his eyes wide with horror. And further back, peeking around the corner, were Miller and Russo. The color had drained from their faces. They looked like ghosts. The sergeant looked at me, then at the paperwork in his hand, then back at me. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. Your Honor, he finally croaked. I stood up slowly, my joints stiff. I held up my cuffed hands. Sergeant, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel on my wrists. I believe these belong to you. The next few minutes were a blur of frantic, clumsy activity. The sergeant fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them in the lock. The cuffs came off, leaving deep, red welts on my skin. Your Honor, I am so sorry, the sergeant stammered, not looking me in the eye. There's been a terrible mistake. Miller and Russo were brought forward. They stood before me, their heads bowed, the swagger completely gone. They looked like school children caught cheating on a test. Sir, Miller began, his voice barely a whisper. We didn't know, and that was it. That was the phrase that broke through my rage and my sadness and hit the core of the problem. We didn't know. I looked at him, and for the first time, he met my gaze. I saw fear in his eyes, but it wasn't fear of having wronged a man. It was the fear of having wronged a powerful man. He wasn't sorry for the injustice. He was sorry for the consequences. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, letting the weight of his mistake settle in the air between us. I let him see the ink on my fingers, the scrape on my cheek, the marks on my wrists. I wanted him to see what he had done, not to the Chief Justice, but to Arthur Hayes. David handed me my coat and my belongings. The silk tie felt alien in my hand. He drove me home in silence. As we pulled into my driveway, the house was lit up. Sarah was standing in the doorway, a silhouette of worry. She must have known something was wrong when I didn't come home, didn't answer my phone. When I got out of the car, she rushed to me. She saw my face, my wrists, and a small, wounded sound escaped her lips. She didn't ask what happened. She knew, in her own way. She had been waiting for a night like this my whole life. She just wrapped her arms around me, and I leaned into her, the full weight of the night finally crashing down on me, inside my warm, safe home. Under the gentle lights, I finally let the tears come. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of a profound, heartbreaking sorrow for the state of the world I had sworn to uphold. The next day, the story was everywhere. It was a scandal. The mayor called. The governor issued a statement. There were calls for Miller and Russo to be fired, for the police chief to resign. They all expected me to be vindicated, to be triumphant. But I felt none of that. I sat in my study, the law books lining the walls like silent, mocking witnesses. I looked at my robes, hanging on a stand in the corner. For the first time, they looked like a costume, a disguise that had failed to work. A week later, I called a meeting. The mayor was there, the police chief, and at my insistence, Officers Miller and Russo. They sat at the far end of a long, polished table in my formal office at the courthouse. They looked small and lost in the grand room. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just told them the story, from my perspective. I told them about my walk, about thinking of my wife's lasagna. I told them about the feeling of the cold metal on my cheek, the bite of the handcuffs. I told them about sitting in that cell, feeling like my entire life had been erased. When I was finished, the room was silent. The problem, I said finally, my voice quiet, but carrying across the table, is not that you arrested the Chief Justice. The problem is that you arrested a man who was doing nothing more than walking home. The problem is that you saw his skin color, and that was enough to presume his guilt. I looked directly at Miller and Russo. You told me you were sorry because you didn't know who I was. But you should be sorry because you didn't know who I wasn't. I wasn't a burglar. I wasn't a threat. I was a citizen, and you failed him. You failed the law you swore to uphold. I announced that I would not be pressing personal charges. That surprised them. Firing them would be easy. It would be a neat, tidy solution that would allow everyone to say the problem was fixed. But the problem wasn't Miller and Russo. They were just symptoms of the disease. Instead, I said, and I felt a new kind of strength solidify within me. Forged in the fire of that night's humiliation, I am creating a new task force on policing and community relations. It will report directly to my office. We will review training, procedures, and every single civilian complaint from the last 10 years. We will change this system from the inside out. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it would be a long, hard fight. But as I sat there, looking at the men who had arrested me, I knew I had to do it. The world my father spoke of, the one where you had to be 3 times as good just to be seen as equal, was still here. It had found me on my own quiet street. My life was no longer just about interpreting the law from a distance. It was about grappling with its failures on the ground. The scrape on my cheek has healed, and the marks on my wrists have faded, but a scar remains on my soul. It's a permanent reminder of the night I learned the difference between the law in the books and the law on the streets, and it's a promise that as long as I hold the gavel, I will never forget the feeling of those cold, steel handcuffs, and I will fight with every fiber of my being for a world where no one has to.